You've tried everything, haven't you? The meditation apps that promise instant calm but leave you more aware of every racing thought. The sleep podcasts that either bore you into frustration or stimulate you into wider wakefulness. The breathing exercises that work for about 90 seconds before your mind hijacks you back into tomorrow's worries or yesterday's regrets. Here's what nobody tells you about insomnia and anxiety. Fighting them makes them stronger. Every time you tell yourself, "I need to sleep," you're actually activating the exact neural pathways that keep you awake. It's the cruelest paradox of the human brain. But what if I told you that the solution isn't trying harder at surrendering, smarter? What if the path to peaceful sleep isn't through emptying your mind, but through filling it with something so rich, so immersive, so perfectly calibrated to your nervous system's deepest needs that sleep becomes inevitable rather than impossible? That's exactly what Cozy Cabin Nights offers. Not another tool to add to your exhausting arsenal of sleep attempts, but a complete reimagining of how you approach rest itself. Here's the controversial truth that the sleep industry doesn't want you to know. Bedtime stories for adults work better than almost any clinical intervention for situational insomnia, and the research backs this up. Studies show that narrative engagement activates the default mode network in your brain, the same system that needs to be online for you to fall asleep while simultaneously deactivating your executive function network, the part responsible for analysis, planning, and worry. In other words, a well-crafted sleep story doesn't just distract you from anxiety. It literally restructures your brain activity into the pattern of pre-sleep. But here's the catch. Most sleep content gets this completely wrong. They either infantilize you with simplistic tales that insult your intelligence, or they're so boring that your mind rebels and starts writing its own stories, usually starring your stress and anxiety. What you need is something sophisticated enough to engage your adult mind, sensory enough to occupy your wandering attention, and slow enough to guide you naturally from consciousness to dreams without you even noticing the transition. Think about the last time you truly felt safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually safe. That bone-deep sense that nothing is chasing you, nothing needs fixing, nothing requires your immediate attention. For most of us, that feeling is so rare, it's almost mythical. We live in a state of perpetual activation, our nervous systems stuck in sympathetic overdrive. Cortisol coursing through our veins like we're being hunted by predators that never quite appear. Your body doesn't know the difference between a looming deadline and a looming bear-it-just-knows threat. And it responds by keeping you alert, vigilant, awake. This is why traditional anxiety relief techniques often fail. They're trying to convince your nervous system that you're safe using logic and willpower. But your nervous system doesn't speak that language. It speaks in symbols, in sensations, in stories. When you're transported to a cozy, relaxing cabin in the woods, surrounded by ambient nature sounds and fireplace sounds, your body receives information it can actually understand. Shelter, warmth, protection, rest. This isn't imagination, this is communication with the oldest parts of your brain. The parts that have been keeping humans alive for hundreds of thousands of years. Now, I know what you're thinking. You've been disappointed before. You've tried sleep stories that promised the world and delivered monotone narration over generic rainstorm sounds. You've invested in expensive apps and fancy sound machines and blackout curtains and weighted blankets. And you're still here, still tired, still desperate for just one night of genuine rest. I get it. But here's what makes this different. and why you need to give this approach a real chance. This isn't a product, it's a practice. Cozy cabin nights isn't something you consume passively like a sleeping pill. It's something you participate in, a journey your mind takes while your body learns to follow. The first time might feel strange, too detailed, too slow. Your anxious mind might resist, trying to pull you back into control. But your nervous system is smarter than your conscious thoughts, and it recognizes what it needs. By the third or fourth time, something remarkable happens. Your body starts to anticipate the piece. The moment you hear the opening descriptions, your shoulders drop. Your breathing deepens. Your mind, usually so resistant to rest, actually looks forward to the journey because it's learned that safety lives there. What you're about to experience isn't just a sleep story. It's a complete neurological reset disguised as a gentle adventure. You'll be guided through sensory landscapes so vivid that your brain will have no choice but to engage with them instead of your worries. You'll experience the proven benefits of relax your body and mind techniques that have been used by meditation masters for centuries, but packaged in a way that actually works for modern, anxious, overstimulated minds. You'll discover that insomnia isn't your enemy, it's been a messenger trying to tell you that your nervous system needs something it hasn't been getting. And tonight, finally, you're going to give it exactly that. So settle in, get comfortable, and prepare to be transported to a place where time moves differently, where worry cannot follow, and where sleep isn't something you chase, but something that finds you naturally, inevitably, perfectly. The cabin is waiting. The fire is warm, and your journey to peaceful sleep begins right now. There's something about a cabin tucked away in the woods that speaks to a part of us we thought we'd forgotten. It's not just about the structure itself, it's about what it represents. When we think of cozy cabin nights, we're not merely picturing 4 wooden walls and a roof. We're tapping into something deeper, something that lives in our childhood memories and our longing for simplicity. You know that feeling when you're driving through the countryside and you spot a small house with smoke rising from its chimney? That immediate sense of I want to be there right now. That's not random. That's your mind recognizing a sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world can't reach you. It's the same feeling you get when you wrap yourself in your favorite blanket on a rainy afternoon, pure, unfiltered comfort. This isn't about escaping reality. It's about returning to a version of yourself that knew how to rest without guilt, how to be still without anxiety. The beauty of imaginative environments for peaceful sleep stories lies in their ability to bypass our logical, overthinking brain. See, when you're lying in bed at 3 a.m, your mind racing with tomorrow's meetings or last week's conversations, you can't just tell yourself to stop thinking. That never works, does it? But when you're guided into a detailed, sensory-rich Wilder cabin with tall pine trees swaying gently outside, the smell of aged wood mixed with pine needles, the distant call of an owl, your brain shifts gears. It stops analyzing and starts experiencing. This is what makes bedtime stories for adults so powerful compared to traditional meditation. You're not fighting your thoughts. You're redirecting them into a narrative that naturally leads toward calm. Think about how children fall asleep during story time, not because they're bored, but because the story creates a safe container for their imagination to wander until it gently dissolves into dreams. Nostalgia plays a crucial role here, and it's way more sophisticated than people realize. When we describe a small wooden cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, We're not just painting a picture, we're activating neural pathways connected to safety and belonging. Maybe you never lived in a cabin, but somewhere in your collective human memory, there's an understanding of what shelter means. There's a reason fairy tales and folk stories across every culture feature cozy cottages, warm hearths, and protective spaces. These aren't just literary devices, they're psychological anchors. When you engage with ambient nature, sounds mixed with fireplace sounds during these narratives, your nervous system recognizes the pattern. Fire equals warmth, equals safety, equals tribe, equals survival. Your body literally begins to relax, your body and mind, because it's receiving ancient signals that you're protected, that you can let your guard down. Now, here's where it gets interesting. This is something most anxiety relief content completely misses. The cabin doesn't need to be real for your brain to respond to it as if it were. Your nervous system can't distinguish between a vividly imagined safe space and an actual one when the sensory details are rich enough. This is why describing the gentle wind brushing through pine branches, the soft crackling of the fire, the feeling of worn wooden floorboards under bare feet, these aren't just pretty words, they're tools, they're instructions to your body. When you hear the cabin is small outside, yet infinite within, that's not poetic fluff. That's a direct message to your subconscious that expansion and peace can coexist. That limitation isn't confinement, but focus. It's teaching your mind that you don't need the whole world to feel complete. You need depth, not breadth. What makes this approach different from other relaxing content is the intentionality behind every element. The smoke curling from the chimney isn't random, it's movement that's slow and purposeful, showing you the pace your thoughts should take. The tall pine trees aren't just scenery, they're sentinels, standing guard so you don't have to. The soft steps on wooden floors aren't merely sound effects, they're rhythm, a heartbeat, a reminder that peaceful movement is possible. When you combine these elements in a cozy, peaceful story designed specifically for insomnia, you're not just creating entertainment, you're building an experience that mirrors what your body needs to transition from wakefulness to sleep. And the beautiful thing, once your mind learns this pathway, it gets easier each time. The cabin becomes your signal, your ritual, your bridge between the chaos of consciousness and the calm of dreams, preparing you gently for what comes next in this journey. There's a moment that happens when someone truly settles into a space, and it's not when they first walk through the door. It's when they find something that invites them to stay. In our cozy cabin nights, that moment comes when the wanderer notices an old book resting on a weathered table beside the fireplace. Not just any book, one of those volumes that looks like it's been waiting for exactly this person at exactly this moment. The leather cover is worn smooth in places where countless hands have held it, cracked in others where time has left its signature. You know that specific smell old books have. That mix of vanilla, almond, and something you can't quite name, but that takes you back to your grandmother's attic, or that one library you loved as a kid. That's not just nostalgia, that's your brain receiving signals of trust, of things that have endured, of wisdom that doesn't shout but whispers. When you encounter textures like worn pages and aged parchment in a bedtime story for adults, your mind instinctively slows down, matching the pace of something that's been around long before your current worries existed. The beauty of this scene, the fireplace crackling steadily, casting dancing shadows across the pages, is that it creates what psychologists call a transitional object for adults. Children have their stuffed animals and blankets. Adults need something more sophisticated, but equally comforting. This ancient book becomes that bridge between your wakeful mind and your dreaming self. As the character in our peaceful sleep story runs their fingers over the embossed cover, feeling the ridges and valleys of decorated leather, something fascinating happens in your own body. Mirror neurons fire as if you're the one touching it. Your breathing naturally deepens. The fireplace sounds create a rhythmic backdrop. Pop, crackle, settle. Repeat, and your heart rate begins to synchronize with it. This isn't magic, it's biology. When you combine ambient nature sounds with the specific frequency of a wood fire, you're triggering the same relaxation response our ancestors developed sitting around flames for hundreds of thousands of years. Your DNA remembers this is the time to rest. Here's what most people don't understand about stories designed for insomnia relief. The content of the book matters less than the act of engaging with it. In our narrative, the ancient volume contains tales of adventurers, but notice how we never rush through them. Each word becomes a portal, not to excitement, but to calm curiosity. Think about how different this is from scrolling through your phone at midnight. Phone screens emit blue light that tells your brain it's noon. They deliver information in rapid bursts that spike cortisol. They create anxiety loops about what you might be missing. But an old book by Firelight, that's amber and orange wavelengths that signal sunset. That's information delivered at the pace of turning pages, which is the pace of breathing. That's a closed system. There's no algorithmic feed pulling you deeper into wakefulness. The character in our cozy, relaxing story doesn't devour the book. They savor it, and in doing so, they teach your nervous system a different rhythm entirely. The specific details matter more than you might think. And this is where the craft of anxiety relief narratives becomes almost surgical in its precision. When we describe pages that are worn at the edges, soft as fabric from countless readings, we're not being poetic for poetry's sake. We're activating your sense of touch through language, which occupies the same part of your brain that would be racing with anxious thoughts. When we mention the smell of parchment mixing with wood smoke, we're engaging your olfactory system, which has a direct highway to your limbic system, the emotional center of your brain. Scent memories are powerful because they bypass rational thought entirely. You might not have ever smelled real parchment, but your brain fills in something comforting anyway. Maybe old books from your childhood, maybe your grandfather's study, maybe that one perfect library you found on vacation. The specificity gives your mind a job that isn't worrying, planning, or rehearsing tomorrow's conversations. And here's the subtle shift that's happening beneath all of this, something that prepares you for the next phase of the journey. As the character becomes absorbed in the book, as the firelight plays across the pages and the warmth seeps into their bones, they're not just reading about adventures. They're discovering that the greatest adventure might be the one that leads inward, into rest, into dreams, into the quiet landscapes that only emerge when we finally stop pushing and allow ourselves to drift. The book, with all its tales of distant lands and forgotten times, starts to feel less like an escape and more like a mirror, reflecting back a simple truth, that sometimes the most profound journey is the one that takes us from tension to peace, from resistance to surrender, from the bright chaos of consciousness to the peaceful darkness where restoration lives. And just outside the window, beyond the warm circle of firelight, the world is beginning to transform in ways that invite even deeper exploration. Eventually, there comes a point in every peaceful sleep story where staying inside, no matter how cozy, starts to feel incomplete. It's not restlessness, it's invitation. The character sets down the ancient book, pulls a soft woolen wrap around their shoulders and moves toward the cabin door. There's something magnetic about the world outside when it's transformed by snow, especially at night. When you step out into that cozy, peaceful landscape, the first thing that hits you isn't the cold, it's the silence, real silence. Not the absence of sound, but a presence of quiet so complete it almost has weight. Fresh snow absorbs sound in a way nothing else does, creating what acousticians call a sound vacuum. Your footsteps land soft, muffled, like walking on clouds made solid. Each breath becomes visible in the crisp air, a little ghost of warmth that appears and vanishes, creating a visual rhythm that matches the meditation you didn't know you were doing. This is what bedtime stories for adults do at their best. They take you somewhere your logical mind would never venture at midnight, but where your deeper self desperately needs to go. The snow-covered garden isn't wild or chaotic. It's ordered in the way nature orders things when humans stop interfering. There's a small stone path, now outlined in white, leading between what were probably herb beds in summer. A wooden bench sits beside a dormant rosebush, its seat piled with untouched powder. The wind moves differently here than in the forest, gentler, more intentional, like breath across the landscape. When we incorporate ambient nature sounds into these moments, we're not adding random noise. We're building a soundscape that mirrors your optimal sleep state. The soft whisper of wind through snow-laden branches, the occasional release of accumulated snow from a pine bough, landing with a muffled hump, the distant, almost imperceptible sound of more snowflakes joining their companions on the ground. These frequencies, particularly in the lower ranges, trigger your parasympathetic nervous system, the one responsible for rest and digest rather than fight or flight. This is relax your body and mind at the cellular level, not through force, but through alignment with natural rhythms that predate human anxiety by millions of years. Here's something profound that happens in cold environments, and it's completely counterintuitive until you experience it. The character in our story walks through the snow, feeling the bite of cold air on their cheeks, seeing their breath crystallize in the moonlight. Instead of tensing against it, they lean into it. There's a metaphor hidden in plain sight here, one that works on your subconscious even as the story unfolds. Even the cold can feel warm when embraced fully. Think about how often you resist discomfort in life, the difficult conversation you avoid, the emotion you push down, the problem you pretend isn't there. Your body holds all that resistance as tension, and that tension follows you to bed, keeps you awake, feeds your insomnia. But when the character embraces the cold, when they allow themselves to feel it completely without labeling it as bad, something shifts. The cold stops being the enemy. The body adapts, generates its own warmth, finds equilibrium. This isn't just a pretty scene in a cozy cabin night. It's a lesson in acceptance that your nervous system absorbs without you having to intellectualize it. The garden path leads to a small clearing where the moonlight seems to pool like liquid silver on the snow. Every surface sparkles with ice crystals, each one catching and reflecting light in its own microscopic way. The character stands there, perfectly still, and realizes something beautiful. They're not thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. They're not rehearsing conversations or solving problems. They're just ... here, present. The snow falls in lazy spirals, each flake taking its own path down. No two exactly alike, no to landing in the same spot. There's a mathematical elegance to it that your rational mind could obsess over, but instead, it just becomes visual white noise the best kind. The kind that fills space without demanding attention. When you're struggling with anxiety relief, when your thoughts are racing and sleep feels impossible, this is what your mind needs. Something to watch that has pattern without urgency, movement without destination. The falling snow doesn't ask anything of you. It just falls, and in falling, it teaches. What makes this snowy garden scene so effective in creating relaxing, peaceful states isn't just the imagery, it's the permission it grants. Permission to be cold sometimes. Permission to move slowly. Permission to leave footprints without worrying if they're going in the right direction. As the character traces a wandering path through the garden, no destination in mind, just exploring for the quiet joy of it, your own mind begins to wander in similar ways. Not the anxious wandering that keeps you awake, but the dreamy meandering that precedes sleep. And then, as the cold finally begins to seep through the woolen wrap, as the body naturally starts to crave warmth again, there's an organic pullback toward the cabin, back toward the firelight, back toward what comes next. But this time, the warmth will feel different, earned somehow, appreciated in a way it wasn't before. And the journey isn't over, in fact. It's about to expand in ways that make even this magical garden seem small in comparison. When the character returns from the snowy garden, there's a transition that happens, one that mirrors what your mind needs at this stage of winding down. They don't immediately go inside and shut the door on the night. Instead, they discover something they hadn't noticed before. A perfect spot just outside the cabin where thick blankets and furs are arranged on a wooden platform, as if someone knew they'd need exactly this. It's one of those moments in bedtime stories for adults where reality and dream start to blur in the most comforting way, where logic takes a back seat and your imagination drives. The character wraps themselves in layers of soft, warmth wool, fleece. Something that feels like it was made specifically to cradle a tired body and lies back to face the infinite ceiling of stars above. This is where cozy cabin nights transcend location and become something cosmic, something that connects the intimate safety of the cabin with the vast mystery of existence. And somehow, that combination doesn't create anxiety. It creates the deepest calm imaginable, because you're held by both the small and the infinite at once. The night sky in a place far from city lights is something most of us have forgotten exists. We live under what astronomers call light pollution, where the sky glows orange or purple with reflected streetlights, and we're lucky to see a dozen stars. But here, in this peaceful sleep story, the character sees what humans saw for all of history until about 100 years ago. Thousands upon thousands of stars. So many they stop being individual points and start being a river of light across the darkness. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a cosmic road, and suddenly all those myths and stories about pathways to heaven or bridges between worlds make perfect sense. This is where the ambient nature sounds shift slightly. The wind becomes almost musical, carrying with it the profound silence of space itself. Scientists have actually recorded the sound of space using electromagnetic waves converted to audio frequencies. And it's this deep, resonant hum that feels ancient and eternal. When you're lying there, wrapped in blankets, breathing in the cold, clear air while the stars wheel overhead. Your problems don't disappear, they just find their proper proportion in the universe. Here's what happens in your brain during stargazing that makes it such a powerful tool for insomnia and anxiety relief. It triggers what psychologists call awe, and awe has measurable physiological effects. Your sense of self temporarily diminishes, not in a scary way, but in a liberating one. The part of your brain that's constantly reinforcing your ego, your worries, your identity, it quiets down. Studies show that experiencing awe reduces inflammation markers in the body, lowers cortisol, and increases feelings of connection and generosity. When the narrative whispers, the stars remind us of vast dreams, yet here on Earth, peace is found in simplicity. It's not just beautiful language, it's therapy disguised as poetry. You're simultaneously connecting with something enormous and returning to something essential. Think about the last time you felt genuinely small in a good way, not diminished but unburdened. Maybe looking at the ocean, or standing in an old forest, or holding a newborn. That feeling that your daily concerns are real but not ultimate. That's what this moment creates for relax your body and mind in ways that no amount of just stop worrying ever could. The character begins to notice patterns in the stars, not constellations they learned in school, but personal patterns. A triangle here, a curve there. Maybe that cluster looks like a face, or a bird, or something they can't quite name. This is your imagination in its purest form, the same faculty that creates dreams, now gently warming up for its nightly performance. There's no pressure to identify the correct constellations, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, because this isn't a test. This is play. This is what your mind does naturally when you stop forcing it. When you give it something beautiful and say, just look, just be. The relaxing quality of this scene isn't about nothing happening. It's about everything happening at exactly the right speed. A shooting star traces a brief line across the sky, and instead of rushing to make a wish, the character just watches it come and go. A reminder that beautiful things don't need to last forever to be perfect. The ambient fireplace sounds from the cabin blend with the night sounds and owl in the distance, the soft settling of snow. The character's own breathing slowing, deepening, syncing with the eternal rhythm of the cosmos. And then something shifts in the narrative, subtle but significant. The stars that seemed so distant begin to feel closer, or maybe the character feels more distant from the ground, floating in the space between earth and sky. This is the threshold moment in any cozy, peaceful sleep story, where the boundaries start to dissolve in preparation for dreams. The blankets feel less like fabric and more like clouds. The cold air isn't cold anymore. It's crisp and perfect, exactly what your face needs, while your body stays warm. Time does that strange thing it does when you're between waking and sleeping, where a minute might be an hour, or an hour might be a minute, and it doesn't matter either way. The character's eyes grow heavy, not from exhaustion, but from contentment, from the deep satisfaction of having wandered far and found peace not at some distant destination, but right here, right now, under the stars and beside the cabin where smoke still curls from the chimney. And just as sleep seems to be reaching out its gentle hand, the first drops of rain begin to fall, soft and promising, suggesting that the night still has deeper gifts to offer. There's something about rain that changes everything, and the character feels it before they hear it, a shift in the air, a thickening of the atmosphere that whispers of transformation. The first drops are so light they could be imagined, tiny kisses on the face that mingle with melting snowflakes. Within moments, the starry sky begins to veil itself in clouds, not dark and threatening, but soft and protective. Like the universe is drawing a curtain to create the most intimate space imaginable. The character gathers the blankets around themselves and moves back inside the cabin, and this return feels different from any homecoming they've experienced. The fire has burned down to glowing embers, radiating steady warmth without the drama of flames. The ancient book still rests where they left it, patient and knowing. And now, the sound, that beautiful, primal sound of rain beginning to fall on a wooden roof. Each drop, a tiny percussion note in a symphony designed specifically for peaceful sleep. This is what cozy cabin nights are really about. Finding that perfect convergence of safety, comfort, and natural rhythm that allows every defense to finally come down. The rain intensifies gradually, never shocking, always inviting you deeper into its embrace. First the roof, that hollow drum-like patter overhead. Then the windows, where droplets race each other down the glass, creating moving shadows in the ember light. Then the ground outside, where rain meets earth in a softer, more muffled conversation. When we talk about ambient nature sounds for insomnia relief, rain is the undisputed champion, and there's neuroscience behind why it works so profoundly. Rain produces what's called pink noise, a specific frequency spectrum where each octave carries equal energy. It's more balanced than white noise, more organic, and it literally masks the irregular sounds that keep you alert. Your neighbor's door closing, a car driving by, your own intrusive thoughts. Rain doesn't fight these sounds. It surrounds them, absorbs them, makes them irrelevant. Inside the cabin, wrapped in blankets that still hold the cold kiss of the night air against skin that's now warming. The character experiences what every person struggling with anxiety relief needs. The feeling that the whole world has conspired to create this one perfect moment of rest. Here's where the narrative does something most. Bedtime stories for adults. It slows down so much that the story itself starts to dissolve. The character doesn't do much anymore. They settle into a nest of blankets near the fire. They listen, they breathe. Maybe they take a sip of tea that's been steeping something, herbal, chamomile, or lavender, something that tastes like gardens and grandmother's wisdom. The description of even simple actions becomes drawn out, languorous, matching the rhythm your body needs to transition from wakefulness to sleep. They lift the cup, feel the warmth through the ceramic, bring it slowly to their lips, taste the gentle sweetness, feel the liquid warmth travel down, settling into their chest like liquid peace. See how different that is from normal narrative pacing. This is intentional slowness, the kind that gives your racing mind permission to pump the brakes, to shift from fifth gear down to second, then first, then neutral. The rain creates a temporal bubble where urgency cannot exist, where tomorrow doesn't matter, where even now starts to feel like a soft, blurry concept rather than a sharp point in time. The fusion between narrative and sleep begins in earnest as the rain continues its patient work. The character's thoughts, which we've been following throughout this journey, start to scatter and reform in dreamlike ways. A memory surfaces of childhood rain, but it's mixed with the smell of the ancient book and the taste of the tea and the feeling of the blankets, all bleeding together in that beautiful way thoughts do when sleep approaches. This is what psychologists call hypnagogia, that threshold state between waking and sleeping, where logic loosens its grip and imagination runs free. In our cozy, relaxing story, we lean into this intentionally. Sentences become shorter, pauses grow longer. The rain becomes not just sound, but presence. A living thing that surrounds the cabin, seals it off from the world, creates a pocket universe where nothing exists except warmth, safety, and the gentle pull toward dreams. Your own breathing, if you're listening to this story, has probably synchronized with the rhythm by now 4 counts in, held for a moment, 6 counts out, repeated without effort or thought, because the rain is breathing for you, teaching your lungs the ancient pattern of rest. What happens in these final moments of the rain scene is something like magic, but it's the most natural magic there is. The character lies down fully, head sinking into softness, body releasing every last bit of tension. It's been holding some of it for hours, some for years. The fireplace sounds blend with the rain, sounds blend with the distant memory of wind in pine trees and snow falling, and stars wheeling overhead, all of it becoming one continuous lullaby. There's no more story to follow, no more scenery to imagine, no more journey to take. There's only this, the sound of rain, the warmth of blankets, the gentle darkness behind closed eyelids, and the sweet, inevitable drift toward sleep. The cabin has done its work. The night has done its work. The peaceful sleep story has guided you exactly where you needed to go, not somewhere else, but into yourself, into rest, into the deep healing darkness where anxiety cannot follow and insomnia finally surrenders. And as consciousness begins to fade like smoke dissipating into night air, there's one last whisper of awareness. This peace was always here, always available, always waiting for you to simply let go. So here you are, at the end of this journey, but really at the beginning of something much more important. You've just experienced what your nervous system is capable of when given the right environment, the right narrative, the right permission to finally let go. The question now isn't whether this works, you already know it does. You felt it. The question is what you're going to do with this knowledge. Are you going to file this away as a nice experience and go back to your old patterns of fighting sleep, wrestling with anxiety, trying to force rest through sheer willpower? Or are you going to recognize that you've just been handed a key to something you've been searching for, maybe for years? Think about how different your life could be if you actually slept well. Not just one night, but consistently. What would change for you? Your patience with loved ones, your creativity at work, your ability to handle stress, your physical health, your mental clarity. Sleep isn't a luxury or a weakness, it's the foundation everything else is built on. And you've just discovered a method that actually works with your brain instead of against it. Here's what I want you to consider, and be honest with yourself. How much time have you wasted lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing, body tense, feeling like a prisoner in your own bedroom? Hours, days, months of accumulated sleepless nights. And how much has that cost you, not just in tiredness, but in missed opportunities, in relationships strained by exhaustion, in health issues that stem from chronic sleep deprivation? Now imagine taking just 30 to 40 minutes before bed every night to travel to the cozy cabin, to experience the peaceful sleep story that guides you naturally into rest. Is that really too much to ask of yourself? Is your resistance to trying something new, something that actually works, worth more than your well-being? I'm not here to guilt you, I'm here to challenge you. You know what you need. You just experienced it. The only question is whether you'll give yourself permission to have it regularly, or whether you'll convince yourself that suffering through sleepless nights is somehow more acceptable than dedicating time to your own restoration. Let me ask you something else. What would the best version of yourself, the one who's well rested, calm, and capable, what would that person tell you right now? Would they tell you to keep pushing through on empty, to treat sleep as something you'll get around to eventually, to ignore the solution that's right in front of you? Or would they tell you that prioritizing rest isn't selfish, it's strategic? That taking care of your nervous system isn't indulgent, it's essential? That using tools like bedtime stories for adults and ambient nature sounds isn't childish, it's wise? You already know the answer. The version of you that's been struggling with insomnia and anxiety relief isn't the real you, it's the exhausted you, the depleted you, the you that's been operating on fumes for so long you've forgotten what full feels like. Tonight, you got a glimpse of what's possible. Tomorrow night, you can have it again. And the night after that. This isn't a one-time trick, this is a skill you're developing. A pathway you're carving in your brain that gets easier and more effective every single time you use it. Now, here's your homework, and yes, I'm serious about this. Tonight, before bed, you're going to return to the cabin. You're going to give yourself the full experience, without guilt, without rushing, without checking your phone halfway through to see if you're doing it right. You're going to trust the process that just worked for you and let it work again. And tomorrow, I want you to notice what's different. How do you feel when you wake up? How do you handle the first stressful moment of your day? How present are you with the people around you? Pay attention, because these changes, even subtle ones, evidence that you're on the right path. And if you find yourself resisting, if that voice in your head says, I don't have time for this, or this is silly, I want you to recognize that voice for what it is. Fear of change, even positive change, because your nervous system has gotten comfortable with suffering. Comfortable doesn't mean good, it just means familiar. You deserve better than familiar exhaustion. You deserve actual rest. Here's the thing about transformation. It doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in repeated small choices that compound over time. Every night you choose to relax your body and mind using these cozy, relaxing techniques. You're casting a vote for the life you actually want versus the one you've been tolerating. Every time you press play on these cozy cabin nights, you're telling your nervous system, I'm prioritizing you. I'm listening to you. I value rest enough to actually do something about it. And your body hears that message loud and clear. So I'm asking you directly, are you ready to actually change your relationship with sleep? Are you ready to stop fighting and start flowing? Are you ready to experience what it's like to look forward to bedtime instead of dreading it? If the answer is yes, and I hope it is, then do yourself a massive favor right now. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a new journey. Hit that notification bell so you're reminded when new peaceful sleep stories are released. Because this isn't just about one cabin, one night, one story. This is about building a library of safe spaces your mind can return to night after night, until peace becomes your default instead of your exception. Your future well-rested self is counting on you to make this choice. Don't let them down. Sweet dreams are waiting. All you have to do is show up for them.